Hello, and welcome back to Terri Reid's Attic, a place where we share stories of things that go bump in the night. Sit back, get comfortable, and enjoy the stories. During the first episode of The Very Thin Blue Line, I had the opportunity to share with you stories from the police officer's perspective of paranormal things that happened to them while they were in the line of duty. I have so much respect and admiration for those men and women who risk their lives every day to keep us safe. And I'm sure ghosts aren't the weirdest things they've encountered. So sit back and enjoy episode 2 of The Very Thin Blue Line, and say an extra prayer for those men and women who walk that thin blue line. It happened in the canyon near Spanish Fork, Utah. A fisherman noticed a partially submerged car in the river underneath a bridge. He said that if he hadn't been fishing in the river, he was sure he wouldn't have seen it because it was invisible from the road. He called the local police and they hurried out. We could see a person in the front seat, and then we heard a voice saying, "Help me, we're in here." It was clear as day, said Officer Tyler Beddoes of the Spanish Fork Police Department, one of the 4 men who pulled an unconscious 18-month-old girl from a car, which had been submerged in near-freezing water for 14 hours. We replied, "Hang in there, we're trying what we can." The voice from the car motivated them to push harder because they believed there may be someone inside who was still alive. With their adrenaline pumping, they pulled the heavy, water-filled car onto its side and then discovered that the driver was dead. The little girl was hanging upside down in her car seat, but her head was not touching the water. The responders did not even see her initially, but when they got the car turned over, they spotted her and raced to get her out. The officers have no explanation for the mysterious voice that appeared to come from inside the car. Beddoes said he wouldn't believe it really happened had it not been the other officers who heard it as well. "I don't know what I thought I heard," he said. "I'm not typically a religious guy. It's hard to explain. It was definitely something. Where it came from, why it came from, I'm not sure. I am a mother's call to protect her child." Former EMT firefighter here. One night, we got a call to do a wellness check on someone who dialed 911 but didn't respond to the operator. We pull up to the address, and the house looks perfectly quaint, and a little old lady greets us at the door. We ask her if she knew who placed the call, but she told us that she lived alone since her husband died. We barely get back to the station before a call comes in again. Same address as before. So we drive back out, talk to the old lady again, then leave again. And just as we get back to the station, same call, same address, no response. We drive out there again, believing that the old lady must have been confused. But this time, when we pulled into the driveway, the old lady wasn't at the door to greet us. There was no reply at the door, but it was unlocked. We take a peek inside to find the old lady was on the floor and wasn't breathing. We rush in to help her and get her to a hospital in stable condition. When she woke up in the ambulance, she still claimed that she had never called us and that we arrived almost immediately after she had fallen. It was a 15-minute drive to her house from the station. Before she was admitted to the hospital, she asked me and another EMT if we could bring her knitting needles and a bag of clothes to her in the hospital. I offered to pick up her stuff because I had a friend who lived in the area and we were going to hang out anyway. I pick up my friend and drive to the lady's house. I ran inside to grab the bag and knitting stuff while my buddy sat in the car. But just as I was leaving, I swear, I felt a hand on my back and I heard a voice say, "Thank you." When I get back in the car, my friend asks me, why couldn't the lady's husband bring her stuff to the hospital? I explained that her husband was dead. But when I said that, my friend said, "But I just saw an old guy in the window." He smiled and waved at me. At first, I refused to believe in anything supernatural, so I called the police and asked them to do a sweep of the house. I thought it was a squatter. Nothing was out of the ordinary, and no one was inside. I later brought my friend to visit the lady. He started describing the old dude who was in the window, and the old lady, well, she almost immediately started tearing up and said to us, "That's my Harold." I was working at our jail, and while doing my watch tour, I was heading into medical and heard two people having a conversation. I thought it was two inmates in a cell talking. I went to the first cell. There's no names on the door, so I didn't look in. I went to the next door and it had one name on it. I opened the hatch to look in, and there's a guy in there. I didn't say anything at first to him, and as I was closing the hatch, he asked me if I could move his neighbors over because he was alone and would like some company. I then went over to the previous door and checked in the window, just in case someone didn't put names on the door. I looked in, and nobody was in the cell. I went back to the guy in the other cell and asked him if he had heard people talking, and he said, yeah, they'd been talking a lot. I then informed him that there was nobody next door to him, and then I got out of there. I worked security in a med center after retirement. Opened the place one morning at 0500. As I passed an alcove, for an instant I saw a boy, about 9 years old, barn hair, striped shirt, sitting on a bench. Then he was gone. Anyway, out of embarrassment, I never told a soul about it. I had 8 retired detectives working for me, and one day I was having a conversation with one of them. Very sheepishly, he asked me if I had ever seen anything strange in the place when I opened in the morning. When I asked him why, he said that he saw a young boy wearing a striped shirt sitting on a bench. Then he was gone. The same location where I saw the kid. Other things that happened were coffee pots being knocked over, footsteps late at night when I was closing. Later on, I found out that the med center was located adjacent to the most haunted cemetery on Staten Island. I responded to a suicide as the co-lead detective. A male had hung himself in a tree in the backyard. We checked the residence, and it was locked with a deadbolt thrown on both sides. I called for entry tools and a supervisor for a breach because the decedent's girlfriend was not accounted for, and they lived together. I was thinking maybe possible murder-suicide. Several patrol officers and I were standing at the back door of the house, south side of the house, which had been checked multiple times, waiting on entry tools. I look at the door, and now there's a gap in the frame, and I can see there's no deadbolt thrown anymore. I check the door, and it's now open. We clear the residence, and no one's inside. I even had them clear the attic space. Inside the door that magically opened were multiple notes to family members from the decedent. We all walk outside and are waiting on the next of kin to arrive. Then we try to walk back into the house. The door is secured again with a deadbolt. It should be noted no one had keys, and there were key locks on both sides of the door. The lead and I were now discussing how we were going to have to call for entry tools, and again, the door was open. No one going near it. I again had the residence cleared, and no one was inside. The lead detective and I did not go back into that house that day. My uncle was the sheriff of a small town in New Mexico. He was the most hardcore person in our family, super straight-laced, never BS'd, and wasn't at all a joker. So when he told this story, and it was backed up by my aunt, we all believed it without question. A local reporter named Bob D. would always show up at any major police activity from the police scanner. Big car wrecks, fires, anything worth reporting in the local paper. Everybody on the force knew Bob D. He was around at least once or twice a week at various police activities. Bob was a bit of a joker himself. He would mess with people by flicking behind their ears. People would react to the flicks thinking it was a bug, only to turn around and see it was Bob jerking around. But everybody liked Bob. Unfortunately, Bob had bad lung cancer and died pretty suddenly. His wife buried him, actually against his wishes. He wanted to be cremated. For the next couple of weeks after his funeral, people kept talking about seeing Bob at car wrecks, fires, all the same stuff he used to report on. There were like 20 to 30 reports like this from civilians and members of the force. But my uncle, he didn't buy it. Well, he didn't buy it until the night he and my aunt showed up at our house, gun drawn, pale as paper. We asked him what the hell happened, and he had to sit down, take his breath, compose himself, and then start to outline what happened. I gotta say, this guy never got rattled by anything. He said my aunt and he were sitting on the couch in their house watching TV. My uncle kept scratching his ear over and over. Finally, my aunt asked him what the problem was, and he turned around just in time to see their bedroom door open. Bob D. standing there in the doorway, clear as day. My uncle jumped up, cussed or something, got my aunt's attention, who turned to see him there too. As they both made eye contact with him, Bob smiled, turned, walked across the living room, and out their front door. Closed the door behind himself, and then he was gone. My uncle finally got control of himself and ran outside, gun drawn, looking for Bob. But he really was gone. At that point, they ran over to our place. After, we went over there and didn't see anything, but my aunt and uncle stayed at our place that night. At work the next day, all the guys on the force were giving my uncle lots of, "We told you so." People around town said they saw Bob D. show up at police scenes for at least another 2 to 3 months. My dad saw him in our dark room in our basement with a friend. He was flicking their ears in the dark. During the 3rd month, people that saw him kept saying he was looking worse and worse. My uncle saw him 2 more times, each time confirming he was looking more and more worn. My dad had concluded that he was decomposing, and his ghost was reflecting that process. Yeah, every time my ear itches, I get goosebumps. I worked as a police officer in a small town in rural Nebraska. Back in the 90s, I was patrolling the town in winter. We had several abandoned houses in town, but one seemed to have the attraction of copper thieves, so we were told to keep an eye on it. Drove by it around 7 p.m. Since it sat on a corner lot, I had a clear view of all 4 sides of the house. As I drove around the corner, nothing looks out of the ordinary. About 2 hours later, I drive by it again, and the back door is wide open. I knew that that back door was not open when I drove by it earlier. Looking at the snow on the ground around the house, there's no footprints, so I think, what the hell? I called dispatch, tell them I'm investigating an open door at that address, and ask for a county sheriff to start my way. I walk to the open door, pull out my flashlight, and shine it inside. The house has obviously been gutted for the most part. The plaster walls have been torn down. There's debris piles everywhere. Since there were no footprints in the snow around the door, other than mine, and with all the dust on the floor not showing footprints, I chalk it up to the wind, or maybe the door just opened on its own. I was about to secure the door when I heard a loud thump coming from upstairs and what sounded like kids laughing. So I enter the house and yell out, "Police department, come downstairs." More of what sounds like kids playing. I tell dispatch that it sounds like there's kids in the house and start making my way through the kitchen into the living room where the stairs are. All the while, I'm cautiously checking the main floor. 2 more times I hear something upstairs, but since I've gotten no response, I start thinking maybe it's an animal. Still, I hear what I'd swear was kids laughing. I head upstairs, and it all gets quiet. The upstairs is relatively small, with a hallway at the top of the stairs that has 1 bedroom on the right, 1 straight ahead at the end of the hall, and a bedroom on the left. As I get to the top of the stairs, I hear a thump in the bedroom to the left. I carefully peek around the door, and it's an empty room with a pile of plaster and wood debris in the middle. No kidding, sitting on top of the pile of debris was a page torn out of a child's book with a picture of a police officer on it. The hair stood up on the back of my neck. I got out of that room, quickly cleared the other rooms upstairs, and got the heck out of there. Told dispatch nobody was in the house, locked the back door, and never went back in there again. Serve and protect, both the living and the dead, it seems. Thank you for listening to Terri Reid's Attic. If you enjoyed the stories, please consider becoming one of our supporters. Look for us on YouTube, as well as through your favorite podcast provider. If you have a question or comment, please email us at stories@terrireid.com. That's stories@terrireid.com. Until next time, let me leave you with an old Celtic prayer. From ghoulies and ghosties and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night, good Lord, deliver us.